Good evening, folks. This is Robert Vaughn and Alex Jewell with the DeFi Collective. We are on Let's Talk Radio and the DeFiCollective.com. We talk about all things that have to do with decentralized finance, all things that have to do with blockchain, fungible tokens, non-fungible tokens, anything that has to do with decentralized finance we discuss on the show. And as I said, I'm joined today by Alex Jewell. And today we're going to talk about the financial system. And we're going to pose a question. We had a lot of questions. We get questions every week on our email, which is the DeFiCollective@gmail.com. And a question we got from 3 or 4 people was regarding capitalism or DeFi being better for democracy. So that's going to be our topic for today. And as we all know, a financial system is by its very nature a political system. Financial systems come and go. And we ask the question, will democracies do the same? They always talk about this being an experiment. And it is an experiment. It's nobody ever tried this before,
Right.
So we want to look at how DeFi can affect democracies. Can it make it better? Is it just something that's ancillary? We don't think so, for a couple of reasons. For one, decentralized finance is the first new world financial system that's come about in probably 10,000 years that doesn't depend on fiat currency, which is, currency like the dollar or the yen or the euro. It's based on the blockchain, which is a whole different concept. And I think people are starting to kind of digest it, if you will, because it's new. It's a whole different concept. It's like, when people used to barter, if you came along with a concept that said, I tell you what, I have this coin here and this coin is worth 4 eggs or, a half a cow. But instead of trading me a half a cow, you can just give me a coin and I'll give you the eggs. So that was a new concept too, much as like DeFi. We want to look into that a little bit. Alex, talk a little bit about some of the implications or how blockchain, decentralized finance can affect democracy.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's interesting about democracy is that it's taken many forms throughout history. Capitalism has taken many forms, especially throughout the last century. These things end up being very contextual based on region and culture and, what resources are in a country and things like that. But we really have to understand, well, capitalism as a system is not just the use of capital or the ownership of capital by people, but it's the market being run by the private sector. It's being run by private companies for profit and not by the state for whatever the state's job or purpose is, right? And in democracy, what the state's job or purpose is to inherently protect people and represent people, right? Democracy is a representative government. It's a government where we feel as a people, no matter how diverse, how, whatever, all of the different groups, including minorities, whatever the full spectrum of possibilities are for the population, they feel properly represented by the government, right? They're not allowing an authoritarian to make decisions based on their own opinions, but they're truly being represented. So when you look at where an inherent conflict of interest may lie, if the private sector is running a very important part of the system that does affect it has social implications, the free market, because it touches everything. And if their intention is to make profit and not improve quality of life inherently, or actually represent the people, then that's the conflict of interest, right? And we see that with things like healthcare and other systems. So when we talk about what does decentralization mean for representation and what does decentralization mean for ownership, then we have to understand that that ownership through something like, cryptocurrency or DeFi, that means that we get both the competition and the competitiveness and the creativity and the innovation of essentially a free market, with the important representation that comes with democratization, right? Because by design, it is both a free market and it is a representative system. There's no gatekeepers, there's no centralized form of power. It is truly owned by the people who use it. And so you get that reversal of ownership, you get the workers having the means of production, a very leftist principle, with the free market, which is oftentimes seen as a libertarian principle. And you get both of those together in a very egalitarian sort of way, which is really great for everybody who benefits from it.
Right. I think one of the problems with capitalism is that as it was originally designed by the French, laissez-faire capitalism, let the private sector deal with capitalism, let the government stay out. You hear that a lot now. I don't want the government in this. I don't want the government. Well, the government's all over capitalism.
Right.
It has been for
capitalism's all over government.
Yeah. Yeah, they're almost like one and the same,
Yeah.
And I think that it wasn't really designed to work that way.
Mhm.
And like everything else, that was designed to work a certain way, it evolves, Yeah. And I think it's evolved to the point now where the government's having to bail out companies. Last year, for the first time, they tried to bail out people a little bit, which is nice to see. But they've always bailed out companies, too big to fail and all that. And I think because they've never kind of let the market work itself out, the market's kind of dependent upon the government getting involved. With government contracts, it's not a free market as it was designed. Now, I don't know if it could ever work that way. That's questionable. But I think this is compounded by the fact that a financial system is inherently a political system.
Right.
So, lobbyists, donors to campaigns, you can take 5 or 6 oligarchs and you can pretty much run any kind of campaign you want and make it successful. You can get who you want elected. And I think what's happened a lot of times is people in the government have not represented the people that elected them the way they should. And I think this is something that maybe decentralized finance or blockchain, could maybe address. We talked about this before about voting, just for an example, now if, you had voting on a blockchain, then, there'd be no investigation in Arizona. There'd be no question about who voted, who didn't vote, actually who voted for who, at some point, but there was no way that you could game the system. So that's just one way, that blockchain or DeFi could be used to maybe make democracy a little more representative.
Yeah. And you can have a fair pool of representatives too, right? And I think this is where it changes things up, because in a capitalistic system where people, as fallible as they are, will still, no matter how many checks and balances are present in a government, you still have individuals who have their own biases, who have their own their own sources of money to accomplish what they want to do. They have their own backgrounds, right? It's how people that used to be on boards for companies that are regulated end up suddenly in government positions that regulate those companies they were part of, right? You end up with this interesting relationship of people who, because of a certain form of expertise, because of certain relationships, all of these natural parts of society, of being human, that end up creating imperfections in our systems that will benefit a few and not benefit everybody else, right? And when we can work on systems that have fair governance built into them, that we don't have to rely as much on just inherently trusting people that aren't always intentionally doing things against our benefit, but they're doing things in a way that by happenstance sometimes creates not the best scenario. And so
for us,
right, for the majority of the population, or for a segment of for even a segment of the population accidentally. So the ultimate goal of society is to always improve upon itself. And if we can eliminate some of those biases from governance, if we can eliminate some of those special interests in government that are not our interests, because capitalism at the end of the day is always in the interest of profit and not in the interest of every potential group that the government affects, then we're making progress, right? And hopefully systems like decentralization are a good direction, because they have a lot of those fixes built in. They fix those things. Doesn't mean that there aren't challenges with how we implement that as well, and questions of like, how might this work? But it means that if we're moving in that direction and we're seeing how it fixes those things, we need to continue talking about how to do it.
Right. And anytime I think you have a change in something, as important as an economic system, you'll have a lot of resistance at all levels, not just from the people who have a vested interest, but from the people who are comfortable doing business one way. Just use Bitcoin, for example. Someone said to me, says, "Oh yeah, man, I wish I'd have got it in January, and I want to make a ton of money in Bitcoin. It's going up to 2 million, and yeah. I said, well, a lot of people think of Bitcoin as a place to park money. Not necessarily a place where you'll make a lot of money, but you won't lose any. You'll make a little over the long term, just like stocks. You'll do good. And I think as people become more educated and they kind of see DeFi for what it is, I think there'll be more buy-in. But talk about the blockchain for a second. One of the our political system, it gets manipulated. I mean, we just had a race in Cleveland, Ohio, for the 11th congressional district. Marcia Fudge became the HUD secretary. I mean, you couldn't believe all the people from California to Washington, D.C. to Florida who came in to campaign for, Bernie Sanders was here.
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton supported a candidate. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. In the ads, they were just so negative, but so that tells me a lot of people had a vested interest in seeing one candidate or the other become victorious, and here again, that's an example of capitalism really being the shot caller, when it comes to the political system.
Right. Because Ohio is a stomping ground, right? I mean, they even call it stomping, right? And it's it's a stomping ground, not because, I mean, it's a stomping ground, not because the majority of America's population lives in Ohio. It's a stomping ground because of it being a swing state in terms of votes, in terms of those capitalistic interests that need to sway votes, right? And that's why they spend so much money shipping people in there on private jets, most likely.
Oh yeah,
go to Ohio and stomp for one congressperson. I mean, that's a serious issue, right? How much money was spent on people to go stomp in Ohio, in middle of nowhere, Ohio, for one person, in the state that these people don't even live in, right?
and AOC was here, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, campaigning, and I don't think she's ever been here before. I bet she's never even been here. And so they had, a lot of heavyweights had a vested interest. We had one group who ran a ton of totally negative ads against one candidate.
Right. And it created a back and forth.
Yeah, and it created a back and forth. So, obviously the people, and then to top it off, I think 17 to 20% of people voted or something ridiculous.
Right.
So if you got, 8% of the total vote or 9% of the total vote, you got elected. So you just basically have to have one out of every 10 registered voters go vote for you, you get elected.
Right.
And I think that's what, that's how money and capitalism kind of trump elections, because people get so fed up. A lot of people become apathetic and don't vote at all.
Exactly.
Because
Yeah.
it's all
Apathy is
these
a
ads. It's
wonderful
like,
tool, right?
oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's like you turn on and watch the NBA game. Here's the ad. You
Yep.
change the channel. So when we watch the news, here's another ad. And I mean, it's to the point where, I almost said, wow, is there anybody else running? But I guess there was, but I guess they didn't have money to get the word out,
Yeah.
But I
Those
think
in power,
Mhm.
especially those who don't want to change things in power,
Right.
they benefit from a lack of activity by the people, right? This is true in politics. This is true in companies. This is true in organizations where you have a centralized form of power, and then everybody else is expected then to sort of be either apathetic, silently apathetic, or completely content not having that strong an opinion, right?
Yeah.
If the country runs like a corporation where people clock in and clock out and they pay their taxes and they do what they're supposed to, and everybody's quiet and content, right? Then those in power are not facing any sort of tension with the population, that they can keep doing whatever they want to do, and everybody else sort of just suffers through whatever, whatever the case is.
Right.
And what you see throughout history is you see moments where that no longer works, right? You see these moments of civil unrest where people rise up and they decide that like something has to change, whether it be because they can no longer drink the water where they live, or they can no longer find any work. They can no longer feed their families. They have to bring a bucket or a barrel of money to pay for a loaf of bread or whatever, whatever happens that creates this civil unrest. And what happens in those moments of civil unrest is you either have some sort of, far right nationalistic authoritarian who decides we're going to take back what's ours from them, right? Or you have, some sort of creative, intellectual, French Revolution style. We're going to create some of the most beautiful art out of the ashes of this destruction sort of scenario, right? That creates a lot of, awakening, enlightenment, or it creates a very dark chapter in history, like Nazi Germany. And what is up to us, for those of us who really care about this stuff and really care about what the system looks like, these are the critical moments where we have to have these conversations and we have to push for the things that benefit the people the most. And I think that's why I'm so passionate and why we have these conversations, because we really care about, we think decentralization is that system.
Yeah. Well, I think it definitely is that system. And technology is kind of technology every few years, it kind of takes a jump and it gets ahead of everybody's understanding. We talked about, first you had the internet, and then you had, all your internet programming, you had all programs, and then you had data, I know before it was, what did they used to call it? There was a system before data analytics. I can't recall it right now, but anyway, we're in the data generation.
Yeah.
Where we have surveillance capitalism, where people monetize your data, your personal experience, and they use it to not only predict your behavior, but now they can use it to actually make you behave in ways that they want you to behave. And if you have enough money, you can buy this technology. Not only can you make Alex want to buy a hamburger, but you can lead him to the hamburger joint.
Right.
And when he gets within 100 feet, you can send him a 50% off coupon, and tell him he comes in right then, he'll get another 10% off, So right. I think, data has gone to a whole different level. And I see only now you're beginning to see people who are aware of, how social media uses data to, let's face it, that's how Barack Obama got elected. That's how Trump got elected.
Yep.
was through data analytics. You know,
Right.
that's what Obama said. You know, in his last State of the Union, he said, "Yeah," I said. They said they don't like you. He said, "Well, I got elected twice." He said, "And if I ran again, I get elected again." He said, "I know I would."
Right.
Well, I guess you would know that if half your people are from Google, a great deal of your people are from Google, who
Right.
was sort of the data pioneers. You know,
Yeah.
Susan Sandberg went from Google over to Facebook and kind of took her knowledge of. That's why they put her second in command at Facebook, because she understood the data analytics and the surveillance capitalism piece. Um, so, and I think, you know, people now are just beginning. You know, I've seen a couple books out now, but you never used to hear, a year or two ago, you never heard anything about this.
Yeah, only in technology circles where,
Yeah.
we work with it. But outside of that, people didn't understand, talking to your parents or talking about, talking with your neighbor about what is, what are they doing with my data? There really isn't, there isn't a vast amount of public knowledge on what it entails, right? And how it manipulates us.
Yeah.
There's things like Cambridge Analytica sort of just flew under the radar somehow. There's even documentaries released on Netflix. There's a lot of information.
You know what? 90% of the population probably still doesn't know about it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Which
is crazy, and so, but what I'm seeing, and I think this is really interesting, is that regardless of right and left, there's some of the people more on the extreme ends are aware, even if they're not aware technically enough to the point of understanding how they're manipulated to be on the extreme side. They're aware enough about some things that they don't trust any of it. And so you're seeing this like extremism occur, and you're seeing people get pulled to either side of the right or left because of data manipulation and because of things like that benefits people, profit off of that disagreement. And what interests me, because I have probably some pretty extreme political viewpoints in terms of how we can change things. But what interests me,
don't we all?
Doing right, exactly. I mean, but I think what's interesting about decentralization and blockchain is that it's actually something we can do about it, right? There's a lot of people who just are angry and they keep trying to they spend all day on Facebook complaining about Facebook. And I mean, and they spend all day on Facebook getting manipulated about Facebook, complaining about Facebook. And what this gives us are actual tools to strip away all the noise, strip away all of the manipulation, and really work on creating a system that works for everybody. Because at the end of the day, this is what I find interesting about even the political battle within blockchain, because a little bit of the history of cryptocurrency in general was that it's actually originally a very libertarian or even anarcho-capitalistic system. People saw that they saw the corruption of government by capitalistic interests, and being the extremely free market, the anarcho-capitalistic side of things or the libertarian side of things, they still actually have some sort of egalitarian goal. They go about it in a way that I don't necessarily agree with, but a lot of the same ideas about why we shouldn't trust centralized power is going to be the same on the right and the left. And so, but because of that, we have some trouble with left adoption in terms of cryptocurrency. We have some confusion over what cryptocurrency is, because a lot of people on the far left see cryptocurrency as just another way to maintain power in a free market. They see it as another way for like the wealthy to get more wealthy in changing times. And so what's up to us on the left who do recognize the potential for blockchain is to keep working on solutions that actually benefit the people who can be benefited from it, right? Instead of, because right now it is a fair critique to say it's just a bunch of tech people getting richer off of things that they're not sharing with other people, that, because a lot of the population doesn't understand how data analytics works. They don't understand how decentralization works. They don't understand how cryptocurrency works. These are a lot of buzzwords And if they do, it's them trading it on a centralized app like Robinhood, where they don't even have access to their own address. And they're just literally allowing a corporation like Robinhood to profit off of them doing it. And then sell their data. I mean, this is what's interesting about Robinhood, not to go on a Robinhood tangent, but Robinhood just filed to go public. And part of what these corporations do when they make this filing for the SEC, they're a very long document, they actually have to reveal quite a bit about their business model. And Robinhood's business model distinctly is they're selling the processing of the orders. In other words, a company like Citadel will actually pay Robinhood to process their buys, their market buys. And the reason is because most Robinhood users are brand new traders, and that is a lot of data. More than 50% of them are brand new, and they're all market buys. It's essentially a blank check for a company like Citadel and other hedge funds to get on the other side of those buys. In other words, people using Robinhood are paying to get stocks for other companies to use that data against what they just invested in, to get on the other side of their buys, and before it matters for them. So yeah, you can make some money on apps like Robinhood, but the only reason Robinhood is profitable is because at the end of the day, you're not paying for it. Most people, only some people use Robinhood Gold. So you have to wonder, what's the business model, right? And the business model is you. The product is not stocks. The product is you. And that's the thing people have to understand about all the apps we use, is that if they're free, you're the product and your data is the product.
Yeah, your data is the product. Yeah. Now, if they're a lot of the algorithms, these are mathematical formulas that are used in artificial intelligence to make you react one way or another. A lot of the algorithms are written so, and they're not written so, but people respond more to negative things than they do to positive things. Like if they say, well, there was a big crash and 800 people got killed, everybody wants to see that.
Yeah.
And so what happens is the algorithms, because of AI, they tend to maximize profit for the company, and they do more of what will get people engaged. The name of the game is engagement. They don't care if it's good engagement or bad engagement. It's just that something negative, people, it's like, if you see if a cop changing a tire for an old lady on the side of the highway, just zoom by and say, oh, that was nice. But if you see a wreck, then everybody wants to slow down and see all of it. You know what I'm saying? So I guess maybe that's human nature, but the algorithms are written so they become more efficient at what you like to see.
Right.
That's why, if you like something, or if you like to see something, then you'll get more of that. And, back to your point about the extremes, and I think that's why we have so many people now on the extremes. I mean, it's gotten to the point now where it's totally, some of the things that people believe is it really doesn't make sense. It's like nobody's in the middle anymore. Everybody's,
well, I think it's not necessarily the problem of like, do we need people in the middle? It's more of like, are people at least basing their viewpoints on facts, right? And instead they're basing it on very emotional triggers based on pre-existing biases or complete falsehoods altogether that were driven by algorithmic profit, right? And this is where we run into an issue, and because the extremism isn't built on, well, I have a really extreme opinion about something that I know is real, and I have a really extreme different opinion about something I know is real. It's not traditional disagreement, because a lot of the people really do want the same thing. A lot of the people do want some sort of egalitarian future where workers are compensated fairly, and where corporations aren't running the government. And these are some basic things that, regardless of side of the aisle, we tend to agree on as people, right? We see the problem with those. But how you got there, or how you think we get there, is based on falsehoods.
Mhm.
well, then we have a serious issue. And that's what creates that disagreement. And that's what creates profit algorithmically.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think, one of the problems is, it used to be where you got your news or where you got your information, it was basically three news stations,
Right.
ABC, NBC, and CBS.
Yeah.
Now you can find a station to justify any viewpoint you might have.
Exactly.
No matter,
Yeah.
no matter how far to the right or to the left, there's a station or a YouTube channel or some kind of
Some
channel.
random guy in his truck.
Yeah, that's for you. That'll support everything that you believe. I had an artist I used to do some stuff with. She's from New Zealand. She went back to New Zealand. And I said, "Oh, I called her last year. So how's it going? What's up?" He said, "Well, I got to call you back. I'm headed out to a Black Lives Matter rally." I
Right.
said, "You're in freaking New Zealand." I said, "How many black people are going to be there?" She said, "Well, I don't know. I haven't seen any, but we're protesting." I'm saying so.
Right.
These protests were going on all around the world.
Yeah.
It was like people had been pushed to one side or the other.
Yeah.
And it was really crazy because they weren't based in reality.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the positions on the right and the left, they were just pissed off about this and protesting this. And if you sometimes when you stop and you ask them, so what's the problem? And they'll both tell you exactly the same thing.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes I like to describe, I'll go in like a far right group or something, and I'll write like, well, we need to, in order to end socialism, we have to like return the means of production to the people and, make sure that these corporations are paying their fair share and distributing wealth. It's funny because if, it's sort of a little experiment that I do where if I literally describe what socialism is, but I say that it's a tool to destroy socialism, everybody will agree with it.
Yeah.
And this is the very interesting thing about the establishment of false baseline facts is that if people believe something that isn't true so passionately, then you have them disagreeing with each other over that thing. Nobody's dealing in reality anymore. They're dealing in the addiction to that disagreement that social media creates, because social media, even though it's marketed, Facebook, their slogan is what? A place for friends. I mean, there's nothing about their business model that says they're a place for friends, because they make the most money off of people staying on there arguing for hours. And so,
they do. Yeah.
You look at it, it's so funny because that's where our interests versus sometimes the capitalistic interest without our permission is. There's a, like I said, there's a conflict of interest, because if Facebook is profiting off of our unhealthy addiction to using it, and they create all these tools to keep us on there longer to make more money, and they know the psychological principles of what keeps people somewhere longer is not just that addiction, but the emotional connection, and you create the stronger emotional connection, basic psychology, with negative emotions more than you do with positive emotions. Right. So with those facts, their business model is literally just upsetting people and having them addicted to the thing that upsets them. And and we should all have an issue with that, right? We should all have an issue with that fundamental business model that goes against our quality of life, our happiness, our relationships, and even our attachment to reality. A lot of people weren't ready for the internet because, like you said, there were 3 news stations. They were all pretty factual. There was 1 or 2 newspapers. They were all pretty factual. There was 1 library with maybe a couple books on any given subject, and they were the most factual books possible. And now we as a society weren't quite ready for the internet that we thought would make everybody smarter, but instead it made misinformation equal. It gave it an equal microphone and an equal playing field to facts. And when that happened, it just made stupid people more dangerous, right? It made stupid people, or worse, nefarious people, more dangerous in terms of being able to manipulate public opinion. And that's what we have to start on doing, right? Now that we've seen that play out over years and seen the destruction of that, Well, now we have to sort of reel that back in and say like, okay, what do we do about this? And that's where I think decentralization is really important.
Right. And I think not, I won't say too many, but some of the decision makers are becoming aware, I think, of the role that social media plays in disseminating, information that may not be true.
Yeah.
There was a study last week where there were 12 people who were responsible for 92% of all the false information on the vaccine. It's like 12 people, because it went anywhere from the vaccine will change your DNA generations to Bill Gates has nanoparticles in there, and if you stand under a 5G line, you'll become magnetic and you can stick a piece of metal on your chest. And I mean, we hear that and we go, wow, that's crazy. But a lot of people actually believe it.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they don't have the expertise, right? Expertise is dead.
Right.
And so if one person who claims to be an expert is online and louder than the consensus of experts who are busy working, I guess, that one person becomes way more dangerous and way more influential than, the more serious group that has consensus on something that they fully understand, versus the person who wants to sell a book or wants to sell a fad diet or wants to sell, who wants to sell misinformation for their own benefit because of their own connection to a rogue news network or publication or politician, right? And you see that because even the way like politicians do that, you see ones that are very active on Twitter, the Ted Cruz's and the Marjorie Taylor Greenes. I mean, how many times do they have to retract or like apologize or sort of like stumble over something that they tweeted? But even if they go back 2 weeks later and delete the tweet, that tweet is everywhere now. It is copied and pasted everywhere. It is, in every far right Facebook group. And it's created this whole, it's created a lot of waves. And so them retracting it later that nobody sees that retraction. Nobody cares about that. They latch onto the original idea. And this is so dangerous in terms of how it impacts public opinion. And it's driven by social media.
Yeah. I mean, it just taking the vaccine, for instance. I mean, I've heard a lot of reasons why people won't take the vaccine. From I don't know what's in it. Would you take the flu vaccine? Yeah. You take the measles? Yeah, but this is different. I don't know what's in it. I heard that it changes your DNA, or I heard, on social media, somebody told me something. And I don't know, it kind of doesn't make sense because the disease is much worse than the vaccine.
Yeah, arguably, there's absolutely no disagreement.
I mean, no
matter where you're getting your information,
these people, when you hear somebody describe it, I know 2 people personally that passed away from it. And I know a couple that had it, and almost a year later, they're still having neurological symptoms, like getting dizzy, can't walk, can't concentrate, or be going somewhere and forget where they're going. And these are people, in their 30s and 40s. They're not, you can't blame it on a senior moment. I mean, these are younger people.
Right.
And I think it's good for people to maybe see some of these people and how, these people are like really sick.
Right.
And, there was a doctor on TV today, and he said that this social media is so strong in some of these people that they'll be in the hospital dying, and they say, well, I still wouldn't take the vaccine. They say,
well, this is a great example of
how I still wouldn't take it. And the doctor says, well, why'd you come to the hospital?
Right. You don't trust the medical community for the solution that they've devised, but you are suddenly at the hospital wanting their help because you trust their expertise, right? I mean, this is the double standard of like, on one hand, somebody will tell you, well, you don't actually know what's in it. That's just what the FDA told you. But the reason I don't trust it is because it's not FDA approved yet. And you're like, okay, so do you trust the FDA or do you not trust the FDA? Because your same argument against it relies on the institution that you're using to justify not trusting it, right? Yeah. And the thing is, it's like, well, I don't know what's in it. Every question or thing that people bring up often with these subjects are things they could look up. But instead of looking them up, they're too inundated with a timeline that's just feeding them things that build up their own existing bias. It's like, does somebody even know what a nanoparticle is? Like, it's literally just a small particle.
not magnetic. I can tell you that it's not magnetic.
It's like, what's in it? Well, it's literally like a couple of lipids, a couple of preservatives, and a strand of RNA. That's like, messenger RNA. That's what's in the vaccine. It's not like some mystical.
And Bill Gates didn't put it in there.
Right. Bill Gates is like people don't even think about the scale at which, like the feasibility of some of these ideas of like, do you know how expensive it is to put one nanobot into anything? Like, imagine handing out free vaccines to everybody. I mean, we're talking millions and millions and millions of them, and putting nanotechnology in every single one to make you trackable or controllable. The cost of that, for what return? I mean, everybody's walking around with this. They don't have to. Nobody has to put anything in our body. We walk by a Dunkin' Donuts, and a beacon knows where we are, right? Yeah. So who's spending trillions of dollars to put nanotechnology into a vaccine that we may or may not get? Yeah. And relying on that as some sort of master plan to even do what? It's so confusing. Because of social media, people create these ideas of like, I don't trust it because of this. I don't, because I read something that some ER nurse said that was copied and pasted.
But see, it was turned into a cultural issue.
Right.
How the hell a mask and a vaccine could become a cultural issue? It's beyond me.
Yeah.
And
that's the power of, that's the power of political
media
through social media.
That's the power of political will through social media. Yeah.
Yep.
And I mean, it's like to have someone dying on the deathbed saying, I still wouldn't take the vaccine.
Right.
And then on the other hand, you have people who get very sick and they say, oh God, I wish I would have taken it. And,
right.
and the doctor says a lot of people before they die, that's the last thing that comes out of their mouth. I wish I had taken it,
It's not perfect, but either you trust modern medicine or you don't, right? That's really what it comes down to.
Right.
And you and I are living proof of modern medicine saving lives, right? There's plenty of things that have gone awry. There's plenty of pharmaceutical things because of capitalism that have been misused, right? The opioid crisis is a very great example of that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But when you have to be really reasonable in terms of how you analyze facts about something. And this is where
you have to use common sense too.
Right.
I know that, OxyContin is 3 to 5 times as potent as morphine.
Right.
Right. Just let that sink in for a minute.
Right.
OxyContin is 3 to 5 times as potent and as addictive as morphine.
Yeah.
But you could go and get, have a sore back and get OxyContin. And they say, oh no, it doesn't addict you unless you take it for a long time. But by then you're addicted. So you got to keep it's like drug dealing,
Yeah, exactly. Well, that was the sales lie, right?
Yeah, it's like the old drug dealers,
Look at their sales pipeline and how something that was originally really created for people with severe cancer and things like that, something like fentanyl, for example, and how these drugs ended up, they saw the profit of like giving that to people that didn't need it, right? But when you have to be contextual and you have to use that common sense of like, well, in terms of a vaccine that I'm not even paying for, that all of the conspiracy theories revolve around some really unreasonable, very expensive and unnecessary agenda that was like not really probable. But what it does prevent and what the numbers are showing it prevent is actually way more deadly then the very extremely rare allergic reaction, which is not also evidence of a nefarious thing, then like when you look at just those base facts, it's like, well, what am I, but because of social media, it creates an entire narrative that doesn't exist, right? Social media creates narratives, and then it creates enemies based on political affiliation. And all of that is your data being manipulated against you to control your opinion so that the social media giants make more money off of your disagreement. And in this case, has actually been very dangerous, obviously, to human life. I mean, look at the cost of human life because of that disagreement that 50 years ago, 100 years ago, or in other countries right now, people are begging to have the medical solution because they recognize that it's a medical solution and it's not a political issue. It's literally modern medicine. It's science that can save lives. And it's turned into this political issue because of social media.
Yeah, and it's really it's become an issue, and because of social media, people get so wound up about it. It's like now the governor of Florida said we don't live in a kind of country where we lose our freedom and have to wear masks. Now, Florida, if you're a kid right now, you get COVID in Florida, there's no hospital beds available for you.
Right.
That's how bad it's gotten.
But masks are obviously communism. So
yeah, and that's one of the easiest ways to stop the spread. It was, I got a physical not long ago, and I was asking my doctor. I said, "So what? Where are we at with this COVID thing? Blah blah blah. What about the flu?" He said, "Robert," he said, "last year," he said, "after February, I did not see one case of the flu." And he works in the ER once a week.
No.
He said, "I did not see one case of the flu." I said, "Why was that?" He said, "Because people were wearing masks."
Yeah. Exactly.
And I think you can see now the lie. And I'm the same way. After I got my vaccine, I said, "Oh man, I'm bulletproof. Hell with this mask." And I was like, "Oh, wait a minute, what is this?"
Yeah, I'm
Delta
kind of in the
variant
same
stuff
boat.
I'm hearing. What's this Delta variant crap I'm hearing about?
Mask back on for me because but like
I wear it. So,
the flu has been weaponized too, because a lot of people on social media, they've seen like these flippant, non-expert written posts about like, well, if COVID's such a big problem, why did the flu disappear? And it's like, well, do you understand what asymptomatic means? Do you understand how contagious things are comparatively? Do you understand that one created a global pandemic without being seasonal, and the other one is seasonal and has been seasonal and has always been had a much smaller impact on supply chain and things like that in our healthcare system. When people don't understand, when they're not willing to take a step back and like analyze differences between things by understanding what they are and how they're different, it's really easy to see a social media post that like creates a straw man argument or compares them unnecessarily. And so, but the reality is, to get it back to decentralization, is that with more decentralized social media platforms where we really own our own data and we own the system, and with more decentralized political systems where we can have fairer elections, we can have, fairer representation in the government that aren't just corporate driven. And, when we start eliminating the corruption in the very important fabric of our society that affects our quality of life and affects how we interact with each other and affects how our opinions are derived and the facts that we're presented with, when we start decentralizing those things and really owning those things like our data, then we would hopefully see, this is somewhat theoretical, but we would hopefully see a much more informed public and a much more egalitarian society.
Right. And I think, what blockchain does, it's a ledger, and you can go back and you can see, just we talked about it earlier about voting. It's a ledger that's you can't manipulate. So it tells you who voted, who did vote, who they voted for. But it could be used, for instance, if there was a chain social media platform based on a blockchain,
Right.
then your data could not be harvested and sold.
You're signing, you would be allowed to then say, like, I have to sign based on the smart contracts. I have to sign to allow this to happen,
Yeah,
right?
I have to agree to let my data, and I don't think a lot of people would do that. But some people might, if the price was right,
Yeah.
and
Or let's say some of us might like, certain advertising might be nice if it's targeted, but if I'm aware
right.
of it and how it's used, that's a very different story.
Yeah. And you have to, I think you have to, the thing is, it's your choice to make. It should be your choice to make.
Right.
And I think what DeFi and what blockchain does, it reverses the flow of ownership, like we talked about. It gives you that choice back, especially, we talked about finance, with decentralized finance. I saw an ad today where a bank was paying for a CD 0.25%, 1/4 of 1% for a deposit. And I'm thinking, like, this has to be a joke or a misprint or something. So I said, I'm going to call and see. That's got to be a misprint. And sure enough, that's what they were paying, 0.25%, which is really crazy, because they take that same money, and I'm sure they're making way more than that. I mean, for instance, with decentralized finance, you could stake that money in a token and get 20, 30, 40% a year. Easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of the banks are moving towards decentralized models. I mean, every few days you hear about a new bank that's moving towards digital assets to offer exposure to the wealthiest clients.
Right.
But you notice it's to their wealthiest clients, right?
Yeah, they got to make money off somebody, and it's always the guys. It's always the people that don't have a lot of money that they make money off of.
Right.
They'll give you 0.25%, but they'll make 40%. So in case something goes wrong, they can take care of their wealthy clients and make sure they're getting what they think they should have.
Exactly.
That's just an example, but I think what it does, it gives you the choice to decide, as people become familiar with decentralized finance and cryptocurrency, it gives you the choice of how to invest your money and where to invest your money, and how much risk you want to take.
Yeah.
If I got a whole lot of money, I'm not taking a whole lot of risk. If I'm 35, making a ton of money, maybe I'll take a little risk. Maybe I'll take a little more risk, because I got time to recoup,
Right.
But that should be a personal choice. And I think what's happened with a lot of the financial institutions now, they haven't given you that choice.
Yeah.
I mean, there was, I don't know how much money made last year, when Amazon went down 100%, was cut in half and everything took a dump. And Trump said, buy. And so everybody bought it and went back up, and it doubled in 3 weeks. There was a lot of money. There was a lot of money made.
Yeah.
There was a lot of money made. And still, the interest rate that you got on your money didn't change much. So I think one of the things that DeFi does, decentralized finance does, it levels the playing field.
Yeah.
And banks, I'm sure, are still going to figure out the way to make money.
They are. Yeah.
They're still going to, and I think that's what they're doing now.
Yep.
Because most of the smart banks, they're hopping on board. They know that, blockchain and DeFi and cryptocurrency is here to stay. It's the new economic system.
Right.
And usually when something new comes along,
Wall Street institutions are hiring blockchain roles, and they're getting involved in blockchain. So
yeah. So, and that's got to be better for everybody.
Yeah, right.
Because it lets them stay in business, and it also gives the owner of this money, or these assets, some say so in how their assets, how they want to invest their assets, and what they want to do with them.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
Yeah, I think realistically,
Mm-hmm.
the banks that start adopting decentralization will probably survive a lot easier. But I think what we have to be in tune with is like how the government starts thinking about regulating, right? And we've talked about this before of like, you have to regulate it to an extent to protect people because that's the role of government, but they should not be regulating it so that only financial institutions and banks have access to it. And I think this is the important thing. It's like, if we want people to own their finances, I do believe that there should be an option for people to really own their finances, to have access to decentralized systems rather than be regulated out of them because they don't have enough money, or because, then we end up in the same issue that we've had with capitalism. And then it does become that leftist self-fulfilling prophecy that they're scared of like crypto just being used to make the wealthier. And I don't think we have to go that route. I think we can continue to fight to allow it to be, freely accessible and usable by anybody, if we can help people understand what it is and why it's important.
Right. Which means they'll have to wear masks so they can go to school and understand. But I think DeFi, decentralized finance, blockchain, a democracy could certainly benefit from that. In several ways. We talked about a few, but I think democracy can benefit from that in several ways. It kind of levels the playing field, not just financially, but politically.
Yep.
And I don't know, there are a lot of different systems. There's oligarchy, which we kind of have now. There's democracy, and everywhere in the world has one form of, one system, one sort of financial system, whether they call itself socialist or communist or whatever, but the undercurrent seems to be capitalism.
Yeah.
Whether it's communism in China or socialism or Russian socialism or communism, whatever they call it now, or American democracy, French democracy, whether there's, they have kings, oligarchs like in Saudi Arabia, but the undercurrent seems to be capitalism.
Right.
It's sort of the common thread that runs through all of them.
Yeah.
And so I think, decentralized finance and blockchain might be able to, make that a more fair system all the way around.
Even North Korea has classes, right? North Korea has the class that can afford a car and can go to the special stores where, and a bag of Oreos is 100 or equivalent to $100, right? Like even North Korea has that, and they don't even have access to the real internet. So, capitalism still exists. The different classes in that capitalistic system exist. And so if we can, think about wealth distribution better, which is partly coming down to ownership, and we can think about reversal of ownership better, think about, what that means in terms of like the workforce of the future and the economy of the future. I think there's a lot of exciting opportunity there, regardless of your political affiliation.
So in essence, since every financial system is a political system, decentralized finance and blockchain will become a political system also.
Yeah.
And it will affect politics. And I think the question is, can it be a fair system if regulated properly?
Right.
So that's something that people will have to address. The leaders will have to address. And I think sometimes I say, well, God, our senators and our Congress people, they don't know a thing about decentralized finance.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if they just try to stay dumb on purpose.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because you don't hear anybody talking about it. When Zuckerberg was up on Capitol Hill, I mean, he couldn't believe that they knew as little as they did.
Yeah.
But I guess if the present system is working for you, there's no incentive to change.
Yeah.
But I think it'll be interesting to see how decentralized finance and blockchain kind of evolves as a political system, which I think it's going to definitely affect our political system. I guess it is already in a way.
Yeah.
It is already. So that'll be interesting. And maybe we'll come back in 10 or 15 years and say, hey, told you so.
Right.
Or maybe we get it all wrong. Who knows? Yeah. But, yeah, I would just say, in closing, that decentralized finance and blockchain can make for a more fair system. It can reverse the flow of ownership in many cases. It can, blockchain is a ledger that can't be manipulated. So anything that you're keeping track of, or you want to keep track of, you can get a true reading from having it on a blockchain. And this could be a lot of different things. This could be a lot of different things. So be interesting. I think we're living in a unique time because there's never been talk of another financial system. And this is like a whole different system. It's different than anything in the past 10,000 years, that always dealt with fiat currency or, coins or dollar bills. And this is totally different.
Right.
So obviously it's going to take a while to sort of come online so everybody's buying in, everybody's using it. But I think how this happens is going to be really important. And I think one of the things that we try to do on the show is try to educate people to the best of our ability, what this is and what's coming. And because one thing for sure, you have to be more educated on finances when you deal with, cryptocurrency, DeFi, and blockchain. You have to be more educated on how things work. You don't want to just, go to the bank and put some money in a savings account and just forget about it. You want to be more involved. So, and who knows, man, that blockchain voting might come sooner than we think,
Hopefully, yeah.
Hopefully, yeah. Okay. Well, that's all I have this evening. Alex, you got anything you want to say in closing?
Back to wear your mask.
Yeah, wear your mask. Yeah. Back to the future,
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks so much for letting us into your homes. This is Robert Vaughn and Alex Jules saying good evening. And we will see you next week. The DeFi Collective at gmail.com is our email. And we're on Let's Talk Radio, the DeFi Collective. I hope you have a fantastic week. Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Have a good one.